Okay.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy schedules to participate in this webinar. We've had some very good feedback on it. We hope that you also got some good information. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jason Spangler. I am the Flooring Division Manager here at Wagner Meters. I'm responsible for not only the concrete side of stuff and the Rapid RH product line, but also in relationship to flooring, wood floors, finished wood products, wood subfloors, the MMC line of wood hand meters that we have. Before I forget, you do have the ability to type in questions. Definitely send those questions to me. If for some reason I don't have time to get to all of them, I definitely will respond to them via email. Or if for some reason you think of something after the fact and want to contact me directly, again, my name is Jason Spangler. My email address is jspangler@wagnermeters.com. And my phone number is 800-634-9961, extension 235. So one of the most common questions that I get from people is, you know, we watch the webinar, we see how the Rapid RH functions, we have an idea about relative humidity testing in general, and one of the big things about it is that it is a very depth-specific measurement. Whether it's drying from one side or drying from two sides, there's a very specific depth that you're supposed to drill to. With that being said, obviously, you need to know what the overall thickness of that slab is. So the question I get a lot is, how do I really know what that thickness is? Obviously, with new construction, you have construction documents. Depending on the situation, you may have the ability to see with renovations, some trenching, where they're moving plumbing, things of that line. Depending on the overall construction, sometimes you can tell from, you have a good idea looking at what the foundational situation is with the building. Worst case scenario, there are numerous people out in the field that are taking a smaller diameter drill bit, picking a couple of spots, opposite ends of the floor, and actually drilling all the way through the slab. So what you would do is take a smaller diameter drill bit, drill all the way through the slab, and then take a piece of pliable wire, make a J-hook out of it. Usually the J is going to be a little bit wider than what the overall hole diameter is, so that as you push it down into that hole, it collapses the J a little bit. As it goes down to the bottom, it gets down to the bottom, it'll spring out, pull it up until you feel resistance, mark off the Sharpie, and then between where that J-hook is at and where the Sharpie mark is at, it ends up being a situation where you can get a general idea of what the thickness is. Do that in a couple spots, have some comparative information. Honestly, most people would say at that point you've done your due diligence. Are there going to be inconsistencies in the floor? Absolutely, but you've done the best you can based on the situation. And it is something where, again, I'm not saying to turn the slab into Swiss cheese by any stretch of the imagination, but a couple of holes like that are not going to be anything that's going to make or break anything. Another question that I get a lot deals with elevated slabs. And as most people know, you have a deep section and you have a shallow section of that corrugated pan that the concrete's poured into. And the question always comes up, am I calculating 40% of the thickest area or 40% of the shallowest area? And again, in this situation, the ASTM standard really is 100% silent on specific placement. They are looking at it, and hopefully we'll have some kind of more definitive direction from the standard and from the committee. But at this point, you have people doing it, a couple of different ways, it seems like. One way is they're actually buying or purchasing a very inexpensive metal detector, much like a stud finder in a wall. And the metal detector has a strong enough signal that it can pick up the shallow areas, so it'll pick up the top of the metal pan decking on the shallow areas, but not so strong that it'll penetrate the whole thing. And so as you're scanning across from spot to spot, you'll pick up a high spot, move over again, pick up the other high spot, mark those two, and then drill in the middle, which is going to be the deepest section. And at that point, you're going to calculate 40% of whatever that deepest section is. Another way that people are doing it out there, and that the ASTM committee is trying to validate, is where you can actually come up with a calculation based on the thinnest portion compared to the thickest portion, take a percentage of all of it, and then calculate that at 40% and drill anywhere on the floor. Again, a couple of different ways that are out there, honestly, because there isn't any absolute direction. So with that being said, looks like I have a question. A couple of them just came through. A couple more just came through. Rapid RH probes are a one-time use that then get thrown away. This is from Morgan. Morgan, yes, the Rapid RH 4.0 is a single usage. The whole point of the single usage is that when you buy the sensors, they come with a NIST traceable certificate of calibration. So when it comes to the documentation process that's necessary to follow the ASTM standard, you have that piece of paper to prove that the device that you used was accurate when it was used. And because it's only used once, there's no need to go through processes such as calibration verifications that you have to do with reusable sensors. The other thing is that if you're going to use the sensor the way it's really, or the system the way it's really intended to be used, it really is a complete system. So when you drill the hole, you're going to put the sensor in there. When the sensor's in there, you're going to leave it for about 60 minutes. Before you leave the job, you're going to get a really good indication. You're going to take a reading off that sensor and get a good indication of what the condition of the concrete is. Now again, standard says to make an installation decision, go, no go, hold up in a court of law, 72 hours is your number. But that 1 hour mark can do some good things for you. If at 1 hour, let's just say that the product that you're using is, let's just say a Mannington VCT. Let's say that 85% threshold is their relative humidity threshold is what they have with their basic glue. If after an hour, you're already reading above that 85, what you're going to see with the Rapid RH sensor is that it will ramp up very quickly and normalize in that first 60 minutes. And then from 60 minutes to 72 hours, it really does flatten out. So the whole point of that is what you can expect is if you're already in excess of your threshold, it's going to do nothing but go up probably about 5%. So at that point, you can already start talking to your customer, the architect, the general contractor, whoever it is, about the potential of what you're seeing is something that there is elevated levels of moisture. And it's like, hey, do you want to actually have a discussion about options to try to keep things on schedule? Or I'll just come back in 3 days and we can check it. But I just want to give you a heads up that it looks like that this is what we're seeing. The last piece is that you're able to once you've made a decision and you're done with the sensor, there's a metal disc that comes with that every box of sensors. The whole point of that is we want you to skim that sensor into the floor. So theoretically, you install a floor, you've done all this, use the Rapid RH, you install a floor, you have documentation that shows, you know, your readings, ambient conditions, everything you need. Plus, what we provide you is on the bottom of 8.5 by 11, there's a grid piece of paper, a grid sheet for you to be able to do a very rude and crude X marks the spot, you know, northeast wall, first floor, whatever the situation. So that if a floor does fail and you are questioned for your moisture results and you provide the piece of paper, you have the ability to really take that piece of paper and correlate it with the slab itself, because again, pushing it to the nth degree. If you were to take the piece of paper that somebody asked you and they sit there and they look at it, and they say, hey, it looks like you got the right numbers, you got the right, you know, RH thresholds, everything was good. But how do I know that you didn't just write this information down on this piece of paper this morning before we had this meeting? You can take that X marks the spot on the bottom of that grid paper and actually go out and find on that specific job those sensors with a very inexpensive metal detector. At the end of the day, what I tell people is this, is that you probably never will ever have to go that far, but it's nice to actually know that you can. Can't guarantee that the sensor is going to work because I don't know what's happened to it. But if nothing else, you can tie the carcass of that sensor into the piece of paper that you have for documentation. The other thing to keep in mind, Morgan, is we do have a reusable, but for most applications, it's usually not. After we have discussions with the customers and try to help them understand or see exactly what it is and how they use things, it's typically not something that they find to be feasible for their applications. Now, in some specific instances, sometimes forensic inspectors, sometimes concrete moisture testers, guys that get paid for every single hole that they actually drill, engineers, some of those types of occupations, the reusable is a great option. And I will tell you that our 5.0 sensor is, when it comes to saving time, it is a product that saves time when compared to the other reusables. But if you turn around and compare it to the single usage RapidRH 4.0, it ends up being a situation that most of the time when you sit there and look at how it pencils out, most people will sit there and still go with the 4.0 because it saves time. Looks like Carl, what would you typically charge for this service? I've seen it all over the board, Carl, to be honest. 100 to 150 bucks seems to be, it looks like it's a typical, but again, it depends on what your time and mileage is, you know, in between having to go out there. I've seen stuff where it's been as high as $300 a hole. So it really, there's a lot of different factors that play into it, but it seems like, you know, reasonable, you know, 100 to 150 bucks is typically what I'm seeing. Morgan again, in your opinion, who should ultimately be responsible to do the test? Installer, retailer, general contractor? Well, Morgan, I am actually on the board of directors for a organization of commercial, it's a commercial contractor, flooring contractor organization, FCICA. And probably 10 or 12 years ago, the World Floor Covering Association came out with a white paper, a position paper on who should be responsible for moisture testing. A couple years ago, because there was a little bit, that original position paper was a little bit dated, the FCICA as an organization, we sat down and revamped it to still take the same position. The position is that it really should be an independent testing agency that does the testing. In certain instances, it's something where it ends up being, makes the general contractor, your customer, and even you sometimes more comfortable with what's going on. Now, with that being said, as the installer, I would definitely make sure that I am knowledgeable on how to do tests, and I am not just taking an independent third party's results at face value without doing at least some sampling myself. The reason why I say that is because at the end of the day, your bond is still the one that's sitting out there, and I don't know, and I haven't heard exactly how things would play out if installation was done based on independent third-party installation or testing results. I would at least want to have some kind of comparative information as the installer, as the person that's responsible ultimately for the floor, to see what it is. So if you have somebody go out on a big job and they do 25 tests, you know, go out and do a few yourself, compare, make sure they jive or, you know, close to it, so that you feel comfortable with the results that you got. If you have a slab that does not have a moisture barrier under it, with a slab reaching an equilibrium point, should you install flooring on the slab? Well, the bottom line is, decision's always yours. But if you know for a fact that there's no vapor retarder underneath the slab, there are two facts that most people would say. One way or another, you need to have a vapor retarder. So whether you have a vapor retarder directly under the slab or you apply one directly on top of the slab, One way or another, you have to have one to know, and I say know, that you're not going to have any issues with flooring. Now, does that mean that people haven't installed with no vapor retarder and haven't had an issue? No. But most people, if you're looking at the odds, would tell you either a vapor retarder underneath the slab directly or vapor retarder on top of the slab, one way or another. The problem is, if you don't have something underneath the slab, you can continually bring moisture out of the soil up into the slab and potentially into the adhesive and or leveling compound, or basically into that flooring system. Are we still active? I see people dropping off. We're still active. I don't have any question at this time. Thank you for taking time. Okay. Looks like those are all the questions that I have. And again, if anybody comes up with other questions as we get off, please don't hesitate to contact me. 800-634-9961, extension 235. And if any of you are fortunate enough to be in Las Vegas next week, we will be showing at the World of Concrete. If you've never been to the World of Concrete, that has to be one of the most absolute off-the-hook trade shows I've ever seen in my life. I think that the number I saw last year was there were 650,000 square feet under roof of exhibits, plus the parking lot with hands-on demonstrations and all kinds of stuff specifically geared towards concrete. So if you have the ability to do that and you're around, definitely do it. We're showing in the South Hall. Don't know our booth number off the top of our head, but if you pick up one of the catalogs, I'm sure that that will be in there. So with that, I want to thank everybody. Have a great day, and I hope to talk to you soon.